Hi, welcome to the World According to Wartman podcast. I'm your host, Mr. Wartman. I'm very excited to start the podcast with our very first full-length episode. This first episode is definitely going to be a work in progress, and I'm learning something new with every step along the way. So please excuse any audio issues or interference that you hear during the show. I am always looking for feedback on how to improve the quality of the audio or content of the show. So without further ado, I'm very excited to introduce my first guest, as it's someone that I work very closely with here at the middle high school. She is very popular amongst the 7th graders and is sometimes referred to as a local celebrity. She'll be joining me shortly to discuss everything from the Super Bowl, to aliens, to Washington, D.C., and even a conspiracy about a lost American colony. So without further hesitation, I introduced our very first guest on the World According to Wartman podcast, Mrs. Cantley. All right, I'd like to introduce my guest with me here today. My guest is someone that I work with quite often and very closely. Very, very excited to have her as the first guest on the World According to Wartman podcast. So without further ado, I present to you Mrs. Cantley. Mrs. Cantley, how you doing?
I'm doing well today. Thank you for having me on. This is cool.
Again,
yes.
As we worked through some of the issues. We had some audio issues in our first attempt. So hopefully we corrected those here for this next one. So we'll see if it comes out a little bit better.
That does make me a guinea pig, right?
Yes, you are a guinea pig, the test monkey, if you will.
Oh, we had to go that far. Okay. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah, at least I'm not like Elon Musk putting a chip in your brain or anything like that. So.
Well, not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge,
least.
but would I tell you if I did?
No, absolutely not. I'm sure not.
All right, well, welcome back. Why don't you go ahead and remind everyone or tell everyone a little bit about yourself for those that never had you in class.
Sure, yeah. My name is Amy Cantley. I am a 7th grade social studies teacher here at the middle high school. And, you know, Mr. Wartman and I team teach every day. So a little world history.
And there's the bell
And
right in the middle.
bell.
I love it. No, we do team teach quite a bit. So if you had Mr. Wartman, chances are you had Mrs. Cantley and vice versa. I think we've had a great start to our middle school, you know, here at the new middle school,
Yeah.
I should say. At the old middle school, you used to teach 8th grade social studies, which is American history.
American history and English too.
So what is the biggest difference between teaching 7th graders and 8th graders? Not so much the history content, but just the difference between the two groups.
Height. No, I don't mean that mean.
Height and maturity.
And maturity too. But height, definitely. We used to talk about how the girls were so tall when they came to the 8th grade hall, and the boys would be not happy about that. But we always told them, you know, give it till spring, and by spring, the guys have usually caught up or surpassed.
Yeah,
So-
I remember coaching 8th grade boys basketball, and that was always one of the big years growth wise.
Yes.
They would come to us as 8th graders, and they were much bigger than they were as 7th graders.
Yeah.
So that summer between your 7th and 8th grade year is a big leap for a lot of kids.
And it's not only in height, but there's a lot of maturity that happens that year. It used to be, I believe, just because kids were gearing up to come to the high school, but now that we've been here a few years and we're kind of part of the high school atmosphere, at least, you know, in some ways, I don't see that big growth over the summer so much between the.
They do show a huge growth in maturity from the beginning of the 7th grade year to the end of their 7th grade year. And I think a lot of that has to do with just having high schoolers in the building.
I do.
And them setting an example, as most of our students do set a good example. But that's interesting. The biggest difference is in height.
It is in height.
Height and maturity. So
Yeah.
awesome. Well, thank you for filling us in on that. Let's go ahead and get into some of the interesting interview questions that I have for you. Just like last time, these are some questions that you couldn't really prepare for. They're difficult, they're challenging, and I'm going to put you on the spot.
And just like last time, I'm a little nervous.
As you should be. As you should be. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start with the first one. You're a big baseball and softball fan. So if you were up to bat in the World Series, what would be your walk-up song?
good question. And so much an identity, or part of the identity of anybody who's batting and gets to pick that out for themselves. So I guess my gut reaction would be to go with like maybe a little enough green lights. Although that's just because I would want something to kind of pump me up in that situation. And that's
Our
kind of
seventh graders love NF.
Yeah, my workout music, and like get yourself excited about stuff. Music.
I'm not too familiar with him, but I do know a lot of our kids listen to him and enjoy his music. But it's just not me, for me.
Yeah. So but again, I would probably go with some old school stuff too. I mean, you can't discount some of those.
Anything by AC/DC.
Oh yeah.
Anything by AC/DC or Metallica. Those would be shoo-ins.
For sure.
All I do is win, win, win.
No matter what.
Yeah, I think that one would be mine.
Is that what you would choose?
I just want to remind everyone why I'm here.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Everybody's hands go up.
And they stay there. All right, moving on to this next one. This next one, I kind of rephrased. I'm calling this one Aliens, Bigfoot, or Nessie. If you had to put all of your eggs in one of those baskets, which one would you put them in?
I think I'm going to have to go with aliens.
Aliens. Welcome to the tinfoil hat club.
Yes,
I have some tinfoil if you'd like to make your own hat.
I may have pictures of me, myself, and students wearing tinfoil hats over at the old middle school during the eclipse, just in case.
Just in case.
Just in case, you never know. But yeah, with the size of our universe, I mean.
And you know my favorite example for that is the whole, if you take a big old cup of the ocean. All right, if you take a big old cup of the ocean and there's no fish in it, does that mean there's no fish in the sea?
Right.
I think we've only explored a cup of our universe.
That's very true.
My thoughts on that one. It's an interesting one.
We do talk about that a lot.
We'll have to put that on the schedule to have a bigger discussion, at a later date.
Right.
We got too much to talk about today.
That's very true.
But tinfoil hat wearer, she's an alien believer. You heard it here first on the Wartman podcast. See how fast that spreads. All right. Moving on. They are making a movie about your life. Who is playing Mrs. Cantley in the movie about you?
I would hope it would be Melissa McCarthy. Just because,
which is a great answer, by the way.
Yeah, I love her acting. I love her acting all the way back to the Gilmore Girls, where she played Suki in that, and then kind of made it bigger as a star based on that. And
wasn't she in one recently where they went on like a road trip or something, and she identity theft?
Yes,
where she stole someone's identity. But
yeah, that was with Justin Bateman, who I love. I would want him.
Oh yeah, Jason Bateman.
Jason Bateman.
Yeah, yes, I do. Yeah, now it's ringing some bells. That one's probably the most recent Melissa McCarthy movie that I had seen.
And even then, most recent.
Yeah, and even then, I don't really remember the plot of it. I remember laughing at points, but I don't.
She stole his identity. That's the whole plot of it, and he's going to get it back because.
But don't they end up becoming like friends or something through the process?
Yeah, there is some Stockholm, I think, syndrome that happens when he's bringing her back so that she can actually fess up to what she's done. But
that's got to be the most recent one.
Yeah,
but that's a good choice. That's a good choice. I could see the personality similarities there.
Well, yeah, we are a lot sarcastic and
laugh
laugh at ourselves. Probably. Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
That's a good answer. I like that one. All right. Let's say somebody challenged you to any video game one-on-one. If you win, you get to survive. If you lose, the fate of humanity is doomed. What video game are you picking?
Well, we've talked about this. It can't be an online one.
It can't be online because you can't pause online multiplayer games, as our students remind us so often.
All the time.
You can't pause online gaming. But it can be any generation. So I'm talking like in the arcade, Mrs. Pac-Man, Galaga, to even the games that these knuckleheads play like Fortnite and Call of Duty.
I wouldn't even begin to know, even how to identify the games that these kids are playing today. That makes me laugh.
Well, I'm a professional. I would.
Well, you definitely
professional
would,
Call of Duty.
And I don't know. Maybe having
gamer.
two daughters, we did not have video games like in our house too much. I mean, I think we had a Wii, or I know we had a Wii.
Oh, did you play Wii Sports then?
We did play Wii Sports. That was
Yeah,
that was a
I
big
do remember
one.
playing that. That was a ton of fun.
Yes, that was fun. That was always, and it was fun for parties and stuff too. Like,
Yeah.
You could get a lot of people involved in that. But I would have to say for my generation, or at least what I remember playing, and I could go Donkey Kong.
Oh,
I was a
Donkey Kong.
beast, or Duck Hunter.
Duck Hunter, I do remember Duck Hunter.
I was a beast in that too. That was not the Wii version. That was the actual ColecoVision version. But I would go with Tetris.
Tetris.
Yes.
Which is the most popular video game ever in the history of the world. Did you know that?
Right? I did not know
that. No game has been played more than Tetris. Now, it's also one of the older games, which I think factors into that. But Tetris is the number one game of all time.
Yeah. I think what I like about it most is this whole strategy thing. Not only do you have the strategy, but you can look ahead and see what's coming next.
There is strategy involved in it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would argue that there isn't, but there is definitely strategy involved in it. Mm-hmm. And I think even just having like an eye for design, it gives you a kind of a leg up on other people, being able to kind of see these shapes before they fall into their little slots or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But I think that there's definitely more skill involved in Tetris than what most people believe.
Yeah.
I do believe that.
So, well, that would be the one. I'd go with Tetris.
All right, so Tetris. Did you ever play an arcade game called Dig Dug? Do you remember that one?
I feel like I have. What was the premise of the game? I mean,
I couldn't tell you what the premise was, but I remember playing it on like an arcade simulator as a kid. And you're like this little guy who your goal is to dig through the earth and get to the bottom. But as you dig down and get deeper and deeper, there's various
the little construction workers.
Yeah, there's like little enemies and stuff you have to avoid, and they have their little area. But once you dig through that area, now they can go and explore the other areas, and it gets like way more challenging the deeper you get.
Yes.
That one was a fun one. I do remember playing that a lot. So that would be, if I had to go with arcade, that and Donkey Kong.
Yeah.
Donkey Kong.
In arcade wise, to actually stand in an arcade and play, I would say Centipede or Astro.
Yeah.
Those were two.
Those are good ones.
Yeah.
And those are ones where like
you have to be standing at the machine to
yeah,
play
you
those.
have to be standing at it, and you have to have another quarter or two like on standby ready to go in case you lose your last life.
Yeah.
And these kids have no idea what it's like to have to take quarters to the arcade to try and play as many games as you could. Because they restarted.
Oh, and it was clout. It was clout to have your name on the screen.
Oh, and people watching you.
Yes.
You would draw a crowd. Just the environment of the arcade is something that I think it is lost. And I would be interested to see if we could make like a modern arcade and bring that back. Like I know that the gaming, there's like social side of it. You can talk with your friends through a headset.
Yeah.
But the in-person, like if they have internet cafes.
They do. They do.
So why couldn't we do something like an arcade where people come and they play the games, but there's a face-to-face interaction?
Well, and I think I think colleges are kind of bringing that in. There's been several college campuses I've been on that I have seen like the electronic like gaming rooms for like.
I graduated. I went through college at the wrong time.
Well, you did. You totally
at the wrong time.
Or maybe it was the right time because you'd have
I would have failed. I would have flunked out because I've been playing Donkey Kong in the student center all day.
If you do get the chance though to visit a college campus, look for those rooms because it's like I've been on 4 college campuses in the past, maybe 4 years, and each one of them.
I did hear about Mount Union adding their esports club, or I think that's what they call it, esports.
They're actually giving scholarships for that now, and they're actually,
Oh man, I'd have had a full ride for Call of Duty. A full ride for Call of Duty.
Oh.
All right, well, we've kind of exhausted the video game topic, so we'll move on from that to our last tough interview question for this segment. What is your spirit animal? So if you had to pick one animal that embodies your personality, what animal would that be? You don't have to look like that animal. Just like it's your personality.
And it does not have to be one of those hybrids you show us.
It does not have to be a hybrid.
Okay,
it can be mythological. If you really feel like you're a unicorn, then I'm not going to stop you from saying that.
Okay, so those are scary.
It can be mythological if you really feel like you're a unicorn, then I'm not going to stop you from saying that. It can be mythological if you really feel like you're a unicorn, then I'm not going to stop you from saying that. It can be mythological if you really feel like you're a unicorn, then I'm not going to stop you from saying that.
All right. Well, this is a hard one.
We did talk about the peacock mantis shrimp in class.
That might be it. Just because when that shrimp hits the shell, it does have superpowers.
It does.
It
It's what
does.
the narrator in our video said.
So, I mean, yeah, that maybe I could adopt that as my spirit animal. I like to be in the ocean and
It's uncommon. I don't think anyone's going to share that answer with you.
probably no. So
I think you'll be the only one.
so we will go with the
The peacock mantis shrimp.
peacock mantis shrimp. Yes.
All right. For anyone who doesn't know what a peacock mantis shrimp is, please look it up on YouTube. We watched the video as a group today during class, and we were all blown away by it. It's a very interesting creature. So just go to YouTube and look up the peacock mantis shrimp, and you'll see plenty of videos of these little guys that, have the world, what do they say, the most acute vision of any animal in the animal kingdom.
Yeah, they see.
They strike faster than a .22 caliber bullet, and you can actually watch it. I think it take a hermit crab.
Oh,
is
out
that
of
what
a
it was
shell.
in the video?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it takes the hermit crab right out of the shell and eats it. So if you don't like watching those things, don't go to YouTube and watch it then. But if you enjoy watching nature, that's definitely one you want to look up. The peacock mantis shrimp. Good. I love that answer.
Okay.
That's a good one. All right. Well, that does it for kind of the interview question piece. But we still have a couple topics and things we'd like to talk about before we go. The big one being the Super Bowl. The Super Bowl happened this past weekend. You and I are both big sports fans. We're always talking sports. And we've kind of been putting this discussion off because we wanted to save it for the podcast. So
That's true.
we've been purposefully ignoring the Super Bowl for this discussion right here. So let's start with, who did you want to win between the two teams that were playing, which were the Los Angeles Rams and the Cincinnati Bengals?
Well, I can just tell you at my house, it was the thing that nightmares were made of, with the fact that it was the Bengals and the Rams.
It was, as a Browns fan, this was a
It
double-edged
was.
sword. It didn't matter which way you looked at it.
Yes.
If it was possible for both teams to lose the Super Bowl, that would have been my vote.
Yes. I think going into it, I was probably just rooting for the halftime show, which we'll get to, I'm
Yes,
sure.
we'll get to that because it was incredible.
It was incredible. But I guess vicariously, looking at my friends and stuff, so many of them are Bengals fans, the ones that have, long since given up the hope that you and I hold on to. That sweet
Oh
ounce
yeah,
of hope
and I
on the
refuse to
Browns.
let go of that sliver of hope that the Browns
Yeah.
will be there next year.
So I guess I'd have to say it was the Bengals, and it was just for the people who, like us, have felt that, oh my gosh, we need to win a Super Bowl.
Yeah,
Feeling.
and I get that because
Yeah.
it's been a rough stretch as a Browns fan. And last year I think was kind of like a tease where, like, oh my gosh, we could be good. Like this is the type of team that we could be. And then in Browns fashion, they let us down this year.
That's right.
So that was frustrating.
right.
But what should we expect as Browns fans by now?
There's always next years that are.
There's
that's
always
our war
next
cry.
year. Yep, next year's our year.
Yep.
In class, I actually made the prediction that the Bengals would beat the Rams. Unfortunately, I was wrong in that. But I'm on the same side of that. I think it's hard to root for either of these teams. You don't want to root for a division rival in Cincinnati. But at the same time, I didn't want OBJ to get a ring after the way he kind of
That still
quit
makes- it's
on the
still-
Browns.
Yeah, that's still hard as well.
I was definitely disappointed that he got hurt. You never want to see anyone get hurt. But I did want to see him drop a couple big passes in the game.
Yes.
Want to see him struggle in that sense. But that was more selfish than anything,
agree.
just because I'm root for my Browns. But if I had to pick, I would say I used to be a Rams fan. The OBJ thing definitely soured me on the Rams. The move to Los Angeles soured me on the Rams. But one of the most vivid memories of my childhood was the 2000 Super Bowl between the Rams and the Titans.
Yeah.
I was a huge St. Louis Rams fan at that time, mostly because that's who I played with on like Madden 2000 and Madden
right.
99. Those were the games I was playing at the time. And I still remember the roster to this day of all the players. I'd hand the ball to Marshall Faulk, throw it to Isaac Bruce, Torrey Holt, Oz Hakeem, you name it.
Wow.
So, yeah, I've got all those names bouncing around in my head. But even though I used to be a Rams fan, I still wanted the Bengals to pull it off. And I think a big part of that is Joe Burrow. I mean, he just makes it so easy to root for him. I think he's the real deal.
Yes, yeah.
I think he's
agree.
like the next big, Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning type quarterback. I don't know if he'll be quite Tom Brady because everyone knows my opinion on Tom Brady. He's the GOAT, and he's just in a completely different league than anyone else. But if there was somebody who was a distant second in caliber, I think Joe Burrow has an opportunity to be one of the all-time greats.
Yes. You look at any of those quarterbacks when you're talking about Mahomes or that were, at the end there, there's a ton of talent in these younger kids that are out there, and it's nice. It is nice to see them replaced in some of the now they're the old timers.
Oh yeah, the Drew Brees, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, Phillip Rivers.
Yeah.
Those are all the old guys now.
Oh, I know. Isn't that crazy?
And now there's a new generation coming through.
Well, you look at. See, when I think back to like Super Bowls and the first Super Bowls I was really involved with, it was the Joe Montana or John Elway,
Steve Young,
those Jim Kelly. I got to see him speak a couple years ago. What an incredible man and what an incredible life. And
I want to say he spoke at something around here recently at the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, he's been at the Hall of Fame a couple of times. I've seen
Game Plan
there.
for Life or something. I think it was something that we took our football players to see him speak. And I think Joe Gibbs has done it before. So there's been a couple big names that have spoken at the Hall of Fame.
And there's a lot. There's actually a lot if you look for them, if you're into football and you want to get out into the community.
Believe it or not, I haven't been to the Hall of Fame like as a visitor, like to see the Hall of Fame since I was a little kid. It was the year Barry Sanders was inducted into the Hall of Fame. Yeah, my dad took me because Barry was my all-time favorite football player. I loved the Detroit Lions too, which you wouldn't think that now because Detroit isn't very good. So it's kind of embarrassing saying that, but I used to love the Detroit Lions. I love Barry Sanders. He's one of my favorite athletes of all time, and my dad took me to the Hall of Fame the year he got inducted. I got to stand by the big bust portrait, the sculpture of him.
Yeah.
They had some of his, jerseys, his gear, and I even got a nice little book from the gift shop at the end that I think I still have to this day about Barry Sanders and his childhood and stuff.
Well, and I think that's one of the things about football is you have those core memories, so to speak, of a time or a person or a place where you were when you
really kind of when you like fall in love with the game.
And
I think that's something a lot of our kids can kind of relate to, as I know a lot of our kids are going through that right now.
I agree.
They're playing many sports and they're kind of figuring out which one's their go-to, which one's their sport. So that's something I think a lot of our kids can relate to.
Sure.
It's interesting. All right. So we both were rooting against both teams, but unfortunately the Rams pulled it out. The Rams are the 2022 Super Bowl champs. Did you happen to see the picture of Aaron Donald on the last fourth down?
No.
So Aaron Donald is the defensive tackle for the Rams.
Right.
And on that 4th and 1, the last play that the Bengals had the ball, I don't know if you remember, Joe Burrow was getting rushed and he just kind of dove to try and throw.
Yeah.
So on that play, they actually took a picture prior to the snap. And in that picture, Aaron Donald is lined up offsides. He's lined up in the neutral zone. So it should have been a free play for the Bengals, who would have had another opportunity the play after that. But they didn't call it. And therefore, the Rams are your Super Bowl champs.
Yeah, well, that's one thing that was consistent throughout the whole season was how stinky the refs could be.
The officiating left a little to be desired.
There was a lot
That's
of
true.
questioning going on, but I don't know. I have the feeling that every play there's something that.
There is, and I'm just trying to
to
stir the pot here. I
Yes.
saw the picture after the fact. I didn't even catch it when it was live. I don't think many people did.
Right.
But I did see the picture, and that was the first thing that came to mind was oh my gosh, we have a little controversy
There
here.
is.
So I'm not doing anything but stirring the pot
Well,
here.
I feel like it's
know
every
that,
time
but
that Michigan beats Ohio State, the same people are stirring
they're
that
throwing
same
their arms
pot.
up in the air.
He was offsides, it was the officials, so.
Yeah, we're not going to go into that.
We're not gonna
because we
go
all know
to
how
Go
the
Blue.
Michigan-Ohio State game went this year.
That's right.
And we're just going to leave it at that.
Okay.
But I did find it questionable, a little bit of questionable play calling on Cincy's part down the stretch.
I don't know why you run the ball on third down.
I don't either. I mean, to me, in that type of situation, I think you just got to give the ball to your best athlete.
Yeah.
You got to let them make a play.
Yeah.
So why they took the ball out of Joe Burrow's hands or Jamar Chase, I think that those are definitely the guys that you got to let make the play. Now, I'm not the one calling the plays, nor am I there in practice. This is just me being an armchair quarterback as I'm shoving nachos in my face during the Super Bowl. But I thought that you keep the ball in Joe Burrow's hands there, and you give him an opportunity to win the game.
Right. Well, and had it worked, then.
That's true. I mean, if he gets a
at.
first down and Cincinnati wins, then we're not having this discussion, and that guy looks like a genius. But I don't know. It's just.
I agree.
I think you give the ball to your guy.
You have playmakers, and they're the ones that want the ball.
Yeah.
In that moment. So.
Definitely. All right. Now, I think both of us were more excited for the halftime show than the game itself.
I've watched it 4 or 5 times.
I haven't watched it since. I only watched it live.
Okay, fair enough. Because I have watched it, at least bits and pieces of it.
I bet there's definitely some references to pop culture.
Yes.
And from like when those songs were released originally, like the music videos and stuff. Like I believe, doesn't 50 Cent have a music video where he's upside down like that?
Oh yeah.
But
yeah.
How long do you think he was hanging upside down during the Super Bowl before? Like, how long are they going to have him hanging upside down?
50 Cent, so
who knows?
Who knows?
Who knows? But all the blood would rush to your head. That'd be a tough job, harder than anyone thinks. But I loved the halftime show. I thought it was a blast from my past personally, as those were all huge musicians for me growing up as a kid. They dominated the top 40 charts. Dr. Dre, Eminem, 50 Cent. Who was the other one that kind of made an appearance there? Kendrick Lamar.
Yeah.
Kendrick Lamar.
Mary J.
Blige. Yeah.
And it was that to me too. And I mean, that was it, to hear those songs and to hear, to see the way that they pulled it off. It's always.
Oh yeah, and when you have that many musicians, just even when one person performs, there's a lot of moving pieces. But to get all of those musicians, to get them choreographed, from where they're standing at certain times and the transition from set to set. So that was a huge.
Oh.
Like, I don't even know what they put on the field. Were those trailers or they looked like miniature houses?
It did, and I don't know what the reference was there.
I know one of them was like a barber shop.
Well,
and they,
it was.
They were,
I think it was kind of like I don't know, the Max Headroom world, the different TVs or the different screens. And,
I didn't even think about them being TVs.
Like flipping, from station to station when MTV actually played music.
That could
videos.
be. You might be onto something there. It could be like a reference
to.
That
was kind of what I was thinking when I was watching it. Was like okay, these were the videos that like you said, you came home after school and you put on,
Oh yeah, MTV. Turned it on and you watched the top 10 music videos for that week or whatever it was. Yeah. That's interesting. I'm going to go back and watch. I'm going to write that down right now to rewatch that because I'd be interested to figure out the motivation or the inspiration behind it.
I think not only that, but I also think those artists relied on their record sales. I mean, they relied on the fact that they were actually selling hard copies of CDs, and I wasn't stealing them from my best friend and burning them,
of course,
or making a cassette. Yeah, cassette. I said it out loud. Recording of those to play in the car when we were driving around town, type thing. They just relied on that, where I just think like Spotify has changed that. We would wait at the store when Camelot Music was around to go buy when it dropped on a Tuesday. A record would drop. We'd be standing in line to actually
that's right. They came out on Tuesdays.
To physically buy it, yep. And we'd be down at either Quonset Hut or Camelot Music and picking up like the disc. And not only would we have it, but by the end of the night, all of our friends would have it too. Yeah. And they relied on that. And that
burn a copy of it.
That whole group of artists kind of epitomizes that in my mind when you look at the way that it went down. So.
Yeah, so even the way music, we listen to music has changed due to technology and streaming, and everything's so accessible. It's right at your fingertips.
Yes.
I mean, I remember like not knowing, what was that song, and you only had like one lyric, and you hung on to that one lyric to try and figure it out, and it took you forever. Yeah. But any days, you can just go and you type in half of a phrase, and next thing you know, you've got 7 different songs, and you're like, that's the one.
Or you're asking, hey, Google, or hey,
Siri, and you can find out within seconds.
This song? Or what's this?
So, I mean, even the music industry has been revolutionized by technology.
I saw some numbers on that. Is that like some numbers on the cost of the halftime show? And the question was, I think one of my students asked me, like, what do they make to be in that halftime show? And actually, most of those artists were paying to be part of the halftime show.
Yeah, I know the Weeknd, he performed. Was it last year or 2 years ago that the Weeknd performed at the Super Bowl halftime?
It's 2 years ago, wasn't
it? I don't remember which one it was, but I do know that he had this vision of how he wanted his performance to go, and it exceeded the Super Bowl budget. And he actually donated like millions of his own money to make it happen, so that they could do I think it was like the fun house part where he was like going to all those mirrors, and they all had like the mummy like wraps on, and it was really kind of odd, but I believe that was one of the things that he was adamant about keeping in the show, and he paid his own money to make that happen.
Well, what a venue to be,
Oh, I mean, what bigger stage?
No, yeah.
I mean, it's bigger than the Grammys.
They definitely are artists when you get to that level and that,
Oh, yeah. And that speaks volumes. Their art right there.
Right.
On the stage in front of probably the biggest event in America the entire year.
Well, what do they say? That more toilets flushed during halftime of the first 2 minutes of halftime of the Super Bowl than any other time of the year.
That's got to be true. That has to be true. Normally, I would take those statistics with a grain of salt, but I'm all aboard with that one.
Well, it's just cool. It's cool to see sports and music still collide, like it does every Friday night out, across the street.
Oh, yeah. And it's back to, the football players, the basketball players, they want to be musicians. And those musicians, they usually want to be the athletes, the basketball players. So it's an interesting dynamic between the two.
Yeah.
But I thought the Super Bowl show was awesome. And I hope they do more like it moving forward.
I agree.
Speaking of awesome, there is a bunch of movies coming out that they kind of announced during the Super Bowl. I don't know how much of the commercials you watched, but I saw like at least 5 to 6 movies that I'm going to have to go and see in theaters. And I haven't been to a movie theater in forever. So that's saying something. But the new Jurassic World.
Yeah, that looks fantastic to me.
It could look horrible, and I would still go see it because it's part of the Jurassic Park universe, I guess. I don't know. And I love the book, and I love those movies. But just looking at it, it looks pretty sweet. Yeah. I mean, the whole idea of riding a horse and like out west in the Wild West next to these raptors or whatever dinosaurs run in that's like a dream of mine. So
a dream of yours?
I want to live vicariously.
We'll put that on the bucket
list.
Live
vicariously through Chris Pratt, because that sounds awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
Not only that, they have the new Doctor Strange movie coming out.
Yeah,
the Multiverse of Madness or something, and
that's going to be a very popular one. I think
that one. Our kids will love that. They love the Marvel movies, so I think that one will be extremely popular. One of the ones that I don't think will be as popular, but I'm probably the most excited for, is the new Lord of the Rings one. Yeah. There's a Lord of the Rings one that's on Amazon, I think Prime, and it's called like the Rings of Power or something. And that was right up my alley. I read The Hobbit and all of the Lord of the Rings books when I was going through school. Owned the movies, saw all of them in theaters on opening day. And I would still, anytime they're on TV, I sit down and watch them to this day.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited for that one.
I think
I
there's
don't know what to
definitely-
expect. I don't know if it'll be any good, but just the hype alone, I'm pretty excited for it.
I think that the backgrounds and just, I mean, what they have done, and if they continue to use the same sets,
Yeah.
you know, like just to bring
They actually
that-
bring these locations to life. They're not.
Yes,
It's not
yes.
all CGI.
And there
Like a lot of
is-
movies are nowadays. They're all computer animated, but they're actually building these locations and bringing them to life.
Right.
That's something.
And I actually, I read a bunch of those books when I was younger too, and of course, but now you look at and the kids that have watched the movies, now they're going back and they're reading the books, and so like just to take it to that next step and like
Good. I mean, that's
continue the
the
story.
reverse order that I would have done it, but
Well, it depended on whether or not you had to turn something in, I think.
yeah, probably.
Yeah.
But I love the books. I loved them as a kid, and I loved the movies, and kind of seeing how they compared to those books that I had read. So that was good. And then probably one of the other ones I'm most excited for is the new version of The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. That one's I know that one's going to be on Peacock, and is actually directed and written by Will Smith, who played the Fresh Prince in the original.
Grew up on that.
Yeah,
set.
and I grew up on that. I loved
Ian
it.
and Carlton.
Yeah, I still do the Carlton when I'm excited. So if you don't know what the Carlton is, it is better than any tic-tac dance that you guys are doing right now. Once again, go to YouTube, great resource, and just look up the Carlton. It's one of the best dance moves, and if you break that out the next dance, you are guaranteed to have someone lining up to dance with you afterwards. That's for sure. The Carlton.
The Carlton.
Absolutely. All right. And just moving along, because we are running out of time here. Our students are going to Washington, D.C. next week.
I know. They're
So
really excited.
I thought it'd be cool to take a little bit of time and just talk about the DC trip, because you've been on it as a chaperone,
Yes.
correct?
Yeah.
I've gone on it as a chaperone, but it's been a long time since I've gone. And I thought it would just be cool to kind of talk about some of our favorite spots, some of the things they may see on the trip, and then, of course, advice for their time on the bus and in their hotel room and for the dance and everything else.
Right. Yeah.
So thinking back to your time on the Washington, D.C. trip, would you say there is a location or a monument that you preferred over the other ones?
You know, the Lincoln Monument is.
I'm glad you said it, because I actually have it written down right here. The Lincoln.
Do you?
Yeah. The Lincoln's pretty cool.
Lincoln is so cool, and it's not just to like run up the steps and see, you know, the huge statue of Abe Lincoln, and you know, even think about Night at the Museum and how he got up and walked from there, which is kind of funny in their in their world. But oh man, you have to see it from each step. Like, or from each side of it, go to each corner of it and look out and see what that monument is actually looking out over in Washington, D.C., and you'll be blown away by.
Now, isn't there a piece to the Lincoln Memorial that is kind of based off of the Pantheon?
Yes, it is
in
the
Rome.
Pantheon. In Rome.
There's some, like the dome structure, I think, the influence there.
Yes.
We had a couple do their research project on the Pantheon. So if anyone's done the research on that, there is influences of the Pantheon on the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. So check it out and see if you can spot some of those similarities.
Yeah, the columns and
Definitely in the columns. Definitely the Greek
there's
columns. You'll see
several
that's
things.
more than the Lincoln Memorial, though. You'll see columns all over the
Everywhere.
White House, the Natural History Museum. All of them have the columns. And even like just normal buildings that have no significance at all, you'll see the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian columns out front. We normally give extra credit.
We do.
For those
we have
that
not
can
brought that out yet. Maybe we'll have to.
We
talk
might have
about
to
that.
talk about that. We'll see. We'll
some
actually see
pictures.
how many people are listening to this podcast or how many are just claiming to listen to it.
Yeah.
So that's an interesting one. The columns there. I'm gonna make note on that.
What about yours? What is your favorite spot?
You're gonna laugh at me because it's not one of the like monuments or memorials.
Okay.
But when we went on the trip, this was at the old middle school. We stopped for food at a place called Medieval Times.
Oh, okay.
Did you guys do that when you went?
We
Okay.
did, yes.
So
and
for
that's where
those that
we-
don't know, Medieval Times is a restaurant that is obviously set in medieval times.
Uh-huh.
So it would be the world of knights in shining armor, jousting, sword fighting.
a fair princess or maiden.
Yes,
to be
rescuing a damsel in
rescued.
distress. So anyways, the whole idea of Medieval Times is you eat a medieval dinner while watching a jousting competition. And so you actually get a big plate of food. It's like a turkey leg and all kinds of like awesome food that you would think of from the Middle Ages, but they don't give you any silverware.
Yeah.
So you have to eat the whole meal with your hands. It's messy. It's everywhere. You're eating like a barbarian. You hear like bones cracking while you're eating it. And then down in the center, you have all these knights in different colored armor. They're competing against each other by jousting. There's sword fighting. There's even I don't know what they call it, but they have the tiny little rings that hang, and they have to take the jousting stick, or I don't know what you call it, and they have to try and get it.
Joust.
Yeah, they try to get it through the little ring.
ring.
So they're not jousting against someone, but they're just trying to see who can be more accurate, I guess.
A skill contest, yeah.
Yeah, that one was always entertaining. I went, we had the Blue Knight. The Blue Knight was ours. Yeah, and I almost lost my voice from screaming in celebrating a Blue Knight victory, which I believe we came in last place after that. So it didn't work.
It happens.
But if they still go, I don't even know if they're going to go or not.
I don't think that's on the list this year. Of course, with COVID, things are changing.
Everything's changed, but
who knows if it'll come back,
But Medieval Times was one of those that I really, really enjoyed.
Yeah.
And the other thing that I really enjoyed, and you're going to think I'm crazy, is the bus ride.
Oh.
I love the bus ride. Now, a lot of it depends on who's on your bus and who you're sitting with and the dynamics between those people. Some get along better with others. Right. But I remember I had a great group on the bus. We laughed. We watched movies. Up on the little screen, I believe we watched Nacho Libre, starring Jack Black, which if you've never seen it, it can be funny. It's one of those movies, it's hit or miss. You either love it or you hate it. But Nacho Libre, I remember watching on the bus. Lego Batman is another popular one. And we even watched The Sandlot, which...
My fave. That's one of
it's an absolute classic. You have to see The Sandlot. If you haven't seen The Sandlot and you're listening to this, just know that I think less of you as a human being.
Same.
The Sandlot is an absolute staple in American culture, and it should be a mandatory watch for all kids before they enter adulthood.
I totally agree.
It's one of those absolute classics. So I was a crazy one. I loved the bus ride. I loved having fun with my friends and, of course, teasing the girls on the other side of the bus, hoping that one of them would consider dancing with me at the dance afterwards. It didn't work, but I definitely tried. So the bus ride's one that it is what you make out of it. I mean, you can either...
If you bury your nose in your phone and... You forget to look up, you're going to miss out.
You're going to miss out on a ton of fun.
Everything in DC. So hopefully you can put your phone.
Yeah, put your phones down.
Yeah, put them in your back pocket.
Put them down, all right, and have some face-to-face interaction.
Call your mama before you go to bed, but other than that.
Exactly.
Put them away.
Good. All right. Well, that's going to take us to our last topic of the day.
All right.
And you can't have social studies teachers on a podcast and not talk about social studies or history. So I invited Mrs. Cantley to be our first guest because she is our resident American history expert. And the topic that I've chosen today is an American history topic. So I'm going to go ahead and read just a little bit from Britannica Encyclopedia about the lost colony of Roanoke.
Okay.
And then Mrs. Cantley, who's
right?
who's been to Roanoke, correct?
I have been to Roanoke, yes.
Is then going to fill us in on some of the awesome theories about the disappearance of those settlers and maybe even some conspiracy theories about who is pulling these strings. So, the lost colony of Roanoke. It's the origins of one of America's oldest unsolved mysteries and can be traced to August of 1587, when a group of about 115 English settlers arrived on Roanoke Island off the coast of what is now North Carolina. Later that year, it was decided that John White, governor of the new colony, would sail back to England in order to gather a fresh load of supplies. But just as he arrived in England, a major naval war broke out between England and Spain, and Queen Elizabeth called on every available ship to confront the mighty Spanish Armada. So that set John White back by about 3 years. Finally, in August of 1590, White returned to Roanoke, but he found no trace of the colony or its inhabitants, and there were very few clues to what might have happened, apart from a single word that was carved into a wooden post, and that word was Croatoan. So that's about it. There's not a whole lot that we know about it. It's one of the great American mysteries still to this day, and there's quite a few theories out there as to what happened. So what are your thoughts on the lost colony of Roanoke?
Well, you're absolutely right as far as that's it. I mean, most history books, that's what it says.
That's the extent of it.
There's a little insert
no
that
evidence.
talks about it, and because nobody does now. Having been there, I mean, it's there's lots of theories like that.
Well, let's talk about it.
So some of the theories.
Let's start with some of the theories.
Okay, so the first one was that they went to the island of Croatoan, which was a Native American inhabited island nearby, and were absorbed into that tribe because they couldn't make it through the first.
They didn't have the supplies. That's why the guy went back to England in the first place.
There was no supplies. There was they didn't know how to work the land. They were living in a marshy area as opposed to.
So who better to seek help from than the natives who were living off the land?
Yes. So that was the first one, and that was kind of what I think a lot of historians held to be true in that area for a while, was that they had just went and kind of just eventually assimilated.
Assimilated with the native population.
Right. And another one was that they had driven themselves inland, that they couldn't survive on the coast. And this one is kind of one of those that kind of pops up as a conspiracy theory, maybe, that they were either assassinated by an unfriendly group of Native Americans, and the indigenous people, buried them. So they're actually, it's called Site Y. There's some forts that are potentially there, but not really there. There's some invisible ink, kind of like Nicolas Cage in the back of the Declaration of Independence.
Oh, yeah. And national treasure.
But the belief was that there were some areas that they could have went to, and that they either perished, they were all sick. And there's a huge dig that they're doing even right now as we speak, that they found a few years ago, that they're finding.
You said it's called Site Y?
It's called Site Y when they talk about the Roanoke people. So they've been digging that up. One of the problems historians have with it, though, is that they're trying to prove themselves right as opposed to prove themselves
being
wrong,
open-minded, yes,
and
trying to fit their narrative.
Trying to exactly. So we don't know if that's true. You had a good conspiracy theory, that has come up in the past.
Well, the one that I had read about was the fact that when John White did return to the Roanoke colony, that he did find bodies. There were bodies and traces of an attack or whatever the case may be, but that there were people there.
Yeah.
But they tried to cover it up.
Yeah.
And the whole idea behind that was that at this point, England needed these colonies for resources.
For lots of reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, they were just overcrowded.
Yeah, so money and resources. And so the idea is that they were killed or died or whatever the case may be, but it was covered up by the English when they returned, because they didn't want to scare off anyone who was thinking about coming to the New World, that they wanted more colonies.
That's scandalous.
And, so if you hear about these colonists being killed by the natives or being slaughtered, that might deter.
It's probably not something you'd put on an advertisement.
Yeah, probably not something that you're going to lead off with when you're making an argument as to why someone should come there. So the conspiracy theory that I had read about was that they were trying to cover this up in order to keep English settlers interested in settling in the New World. which they did, and the second colony was obviously much more successful.
Jamestown, which happened, within
Was
the
much
next
more
5
successful.
years, it was a lot more successful. They were better prepared.
So I don't know. It's an interesting thought, but once again, I think it's just speculation, and then we always want to find some type of conspiracy between the lines. But I mean, it would make sense, but I just don't know.
Really, the last 15, 20 years, they have made some gains, and that's because of technology becoming better. Having some of the tools that they can use to see like what's underground or to but that's just a hard area. If you've ever visited that area along the coastline in Virginia, it's just a harsh area when it's summer, and the
marshy,
storms roll
swampy.
in, the animals and setting ground there. But even
swallowed up by the
more
earth.
so, should we have a winter like the East Coast has experienced this year, I mean, ill prepared for something like that. So
Definitely. I see one of the more interesting, and I think one of the most believable ones, is the idea that they got tired of waiting. So like when so when John White was in England, he got held up for 3 years. They needed these supplies. They didn't have them. So the theory is that at one point they got desperate, so they tried to build their own boats and sail back. And obviously those boats would have been very basic and rudimentary.
I've read that maybe
have been lost at sea, and that's why we have no evidence.
Or maybe they were attacked by the Spanish. I don't know. I kind of feel like that probably there was a split.
It probably is a combination of all of these.
No clear leadership, as far as that there was probably a split, and maybe some of them did go in.
Some probably were assimilated by natives, and some probably were, killed by the Spanish,
and some probably just died of exposure.
How about the fact that they were surviving in an entirely new world and they didn't have any supplies?
That's right.
But to me, the most mysterious thing about all of this is the word carved into the tree.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Because
we don't know. Even to this day, there's still a lot of mystery that surrounds it. Why that was the word carved. What does it mean? You said it might have been a native population nearby, an island?
An island nearby that the natives referred to as Croatoan.
So it could be a hint. It could be throwing a red herring. Could be throwing us off the trail.
Yeah.
Don't know.
We don't know, do we?
I
think that's one of the reasons why I like history so much.
One of the great mysteries of history. So absolutely love that. I would encourage anyone who has enjoyed this discussion to do their own research, and have a talk with Mrs. Cantley or myself about it. Because it's one of the great mysteries, and to this day, we still don't know. And who knows if we ever will.
That's right.
All right. Well, we're about out of time, Mrs. Cantley. I really appreciate you, sacrificing some of your time here after school to have this conversation with me. But in closing, if there was one thing that you could leave our listeners with, what would it be? And this can be a joke, it can be motivation, it can be a quote. If you have something to promote, you want their feedback in a poll or have a question.
Ooh, wow.
Anything at all.
All right, I'm just going to keep it short and sweet.
Okay.
So, my motivational quote is probably just one of the things that I live by is that, you don't have to know exactly what you want to be or what you want to do when you grow up. Just keep moving that direction.
Yeah.
So keep those feet pointed forward and
one step after the other.
Exactly. I mean, eventually you and I will figure out what we want to be when we grow up, right? Well, I will.
Well, I'm never going to grow up.
All right, fair enough.
I'm going to go live in Neverland with the Lost Boys and Peter Pan.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, that's a good one. One foot in front of the other. All right.
Yeah, keep moving forward.
Keep moving forward. All right. Well, that's all the time we have for the discussion today. I appreciate everyone tuning in and listening. I'm excited to see what the podcast holds moving forward and some of the guests that we'll have on in the future. I'm always looking for feedback and advice, so leave any of that in the comments section below. And once again, Lake High School, stay classy and rock 'em. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the first episode of the World According to Wartman podcast. I hope you tune in next time, and as always, rock 'em.